I just wanted to encourage you this morning, and it occurred to me that I just want to sort of confess early on. I think most of these sort of encouragements that I share, I am literally talking to myself because, yeah, I mean, if you followed a couple of these, you know that, I've reflected on the challenges of lockdown and the ways God has spoken to me and encouraged me. And it's been a wrestle sometimes, and so part of me is always wanting to just say this is my learning, this is my understanding, this is my journey, and my prayer is always that something in what I say will just cheer you on in the same way that people speak into my life and cheer me on. So this is almost therapy for me, being able to record these. So thank you for putting up with me, bearing with me. Thank you for those that encourage me back, that God has used these to do something in your own life. And what I wanted to share today was something about, how where we are now isn't where the story ends. And I was thinking, we've been watching at home, we've been watching something called Long Way Round, or Long Way Up. It's a program with Ewan McGregor and his friend Charlie Boorman, and they basically cycle, they motorbike around the planet effectively. And it started in 2004. They did Long Way Round, where they went round the Earth in sort of 20,000 miles on motorbikes. Then they did Long Way Down, where they went from sort of London all the way to the bottom of South Africa, and then they're just doing Long Way Up, which is from the bottom of South America all the way up to Los Angeles. And in the current one, he was reflecting back to the first one he recorded 16 years ago, and it was all about where they were stuck in Mongolia, and the bikes were getting beaten up. They were getting beaten up by the weather, the terrain. It just felt like, battle, and they were just exhausted mentally, physically. The bikes were breaking, and he almost got to the point of saying to his producers, we really wanted to go through Mongolia, but I'm really thinking maybe we should just take a bit of a right turn and go up, sort of, I think it was towards Russia, and basically miss out a big part of the original planned journey. And he was really thinking about doing this, and he was on the phone to his producer, and the producer said, look, you wanted to do this journey, this Mongolia thing was a really key part, and I know it's hard, but I think there's going to be something on this journey that you needed to do. And then what happens is, I think a week later, they arrive at this orphanage, and they meet a load of kids that have just been abandoned, and this orphanage is looking after them, and it's part of a ministry that I think Ewan's involved in anyway. And he meets this sort of 2-3-year-old girl, I think her name, I can't remember her name exactly, I don't want to get it wrong, but he meets this girl who just sort of changes his outlook. And over the next couple of years, his family adopt this girl. And so on the program we've just watched, he does part of the journey with his daughter, who's now sort of 18, 19, and he's really reflecting of that moment in Mongolia where the hard journey kicked in and he could have taken a different route. He reflects on how if he had taken that easier route, he would have never have met the child that was going to become his daughter. And I don't want to sound trivial or flippant about what people have gone through in this season, because it has been hard. It's been really, really hard. We've lost stuff. We've been having to change the way we do life. But what I want to say is this: now where we are isn't how the story ends. And I was listing off, what was Jonah thinking when he was in the belly of the whale? Was he thinking, is this how the story ends? What about Joseph when he was beaten and thrown into that world and left for slavery? Was he thinking, is this where the story ends? What about David facing that giant? Is that where the story ends? What about Esther, as she has to contemplate facing the king that could take her life? Was that where the story ends? What about those great characters, Shadrach, Meshach and Abednego, in the fiery furnace, about to be thrown in the fiery furnace? They probably were actually thinking, This is how the story ends for me. What about their friend Daniel, thrown into a lion's den? Is that how the story ends? What about Abraham being asked to do the impossible in sacrificing his only son Isaac? Was that where the story ended? About Job, who lost almost everything. Is that how the story ends? What about Moses escaping Egypt and then being trapped between the raging Egyptian army and the almost impassable Red Sea? Is that the end of the story? What about Mary, visited by an angel and given this mad, crazy task of carrying the Son of God? What about the bleeding woman who had lost everything? Hope, money, family, friends, contact. Was that where the story ends? What about Peter when he turned his back on Jesus, denied him? What about Paul and Silas, doing what they felt called to do and yet ending up beaten, stripped and thrown in the darkest prison cell? Was that where the story ends? No, it's not where the story ends. Here, November 2020, with all that this season has given us, is not where the story ends. Jonah gets thrown out by a fish. Joseph ends up a place of power where he can really affect change. Esther saves an entire generation. 3 guys in a fiery furnace walk out untouched by flames. David slays a giant, becomes a king. Abraham plants a nation. Moses goes through the Red Sea with all the Israelites. Mary, mother of Jesus, the bleeding woman, healed, at peace. Peter begins the church for every one of us. And Paul and Silas, earthquake, freedom, and saving that jailer's family. This is not where the story ends at all. Not even. And even if this season has been hard for you, I think what is giving me hope is almost that little peek into the horizon, that hope requires us to just look over the top a little bit. Look that this isn't where the story ends. Where's the story going? And then literally at the end of the Gospels, Jesus says a couple of times, in Matthew and Mark particularly, he says, I'm going to go ahead of you. Because I reckon at the cross, as Jesus was crucified, there was probably a lot of people going, this is where the story ends. That Jesus guy that we thought was great, he's done. And you just look over the top and there's resurrection, Holy Spirit falling. Because Jesus says, I'm going ahead of you. I'm going ahead of you so that you can follow me. Because here, whatever you're facing isn't where the story ends. And so my prayer for us today is that God will be close to you if here is hard. But I pray He will give you the strength to maybe just lift your head, to look over into the coming months and see that here isn't where the story ends, but God's taking you somewhere amazing. And that is hope, and that is what we hold on to. Bless you today.